All right, 9 o'clock here, and thanks for being with us on this Tuesday, February 14th, as we recap what happened in the double murder trial of Alec Murdaugh today, the disgraced attorney on trial for the shooting deaths of his wife and son. After we go over what happened in the courtroom today, we're going to be joined by our criminal defense attorneys for their take on the latest developments. Well, the day started with Dr. Ellen Reamer back on the stand. The MUSC pathologist testified for the state yesterday. She's the person who performed the autopsies on Paul and Maggie Murdaugh. Under cross-examination by defense attorney Dick Harpootlian today, she was asked about an apparent bruise on the back of Maggie's leg.
Like between the sternum and...
Were you shown photographs of the back of her thigh that were taken at the scene?
No,
the back of her calf, I'm sorry.
I did not.
Okay. You were not asked to opine about whether this was whether there was bruising on the back of the left calf, which would have been consistent with somebody stepping on her calf.
No, I was not asked about that.
Okay. And you were not shown this photo?
Correct.
Well, Reamer says that Paul Murdaugh was shot twice with a shotgun, the second shot being fatal. Maggie Murdaugh had 5 gunshot wounds from at least 4 shots from an assault-style rifle. One of Murdaugh's neighbors testifying today as well. Roger Davis was hired by Murdaugh to clean their dog kennels twice a day. He was shown a photo of those kennels, focusing on a hose that was hanging outside.
Is that the structure on the picture that you're seeing there, that hose, is that the way you would rewind it up?
No.
How do you know?
My very particular how I roll that hose up, and it's kinked up. If you notice, there's pressure on that hose. Somebody used that hose after I did because it is twisted, and the nozzle is too far up. The nozzle, I would always have it made sure it was laid down flat. That nozzle is too far up.
Of course, the state implying that it was Alec Murdaugh who used that hose. This afternoon, Maggie Murdaugh's sister taking the stand. Mary Ann Proctor says that she spoke to Maggie at about 4 o'clock on the day of the murders. Earlier that day, Alec Murdaugh learned that his father was to receive hospice care. Proctor assumed that the couple would be visiting his parents' home. Take a listen.
And that's why Alec wanted Maggie to come home?
Correct.
And that was from your conversation with her?
Yes.
She called you to let you know that that's what Alec had called her about?
Yes.
You said she was having some work done at Edisto on June 7th?
Yes, just maintenance work, getting it ready for the summer.
You encouraged her to go to Murdaugh?
I did.
Was that the last time you talked to her?
Yes.
And during Proctor's testimony, the jury was sent from the courtroom when she was about to mention the roadside shooting. That's where Curtis Smith is accused of shooting Murdaugh. Maggie's sister remembering finding out that Alec Murdaugh had been shot.
That day that we found out that Alec had been shot, we did have a conversation with Mr. Griffin, and he's
Mr.
the
Griffin
one.
told you that he'd been fired and that he'd been caught stealing money.
Correct.
That's just hearsay.
Well,
Absolutely hearsay.
what kind of quandary does that put you in? You're going to be a witness as well?
Well, that roadside shooting was a major point of contention today. After testimony ended, attorney spoke to Judge Newman about that incident. In September of 2021, Alec Murdaugh called 911 reporting he had been shot in the head while changing a tire. He later told SLED that he had hired Curtis Smith to kill him so his surviving son, Buster, would receive life insurance money. Prosecutors want to include questions about the incident in their case, but defense attorneys arguing it is unrelated to the murder charges being tried.
Mr. Murdaugh's initial claim was that some unknown individual had a flat tire, and some unknown individual, supposedly under the guise of stopping for help, then suddenly shot him in the head. He went so far as to draw have with a composite artist to draw a composite photograph. Again, I'm not trying to get into too much with the detail, But that, of course, the immediate effect of that is that he's been targeted by some unknown individual. That was a complete lie, and that's the point of that statement.
He didn't do it, and I think they will concede he didn't do it to get some sort of sympathy. He did it to be dead. That's why he did it. And unfortunately, Eddie Smith, at 4 feet, couldn't shoot somebody in the head and kill him.
Well, Waters said that Curtis Smith, also known as Cousin Eddie, is on the prosecution's list of witnesses, but they may not call him to testify. Harpootlian said he looks forward to cross-examining Smith. Judge Newman says they will decide if he will allow the testimony on the roadside shooting tomorrow. All right, we're now joined by our criminal defense attorneys, our legal experts tonight, Luke and Brian Shealy. Guys, thank you so very much.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
I don't know where to dive in. Maybe let's talk about Cousin Eddie, Curtis Smith. This was a big point of conversation in the courtroom today. What happened on that roadside in that shooting incident in September of 2021. Brian, I know you've been saying that we were going to have Cousin Eddie on the stand, as he's called, but that may not happen now.
Yes, JR, I've been counting on it. He's been alluded to throughout this trial by the lawyers. He's on the witness list, of course. And in theory, in this very much circumstantial case, he would have been one of the only state witnesses that would have provided some direct evidence, potentially a confession on the side of the road before then an assisted kind of suicide. And so, you know, the testimony that was trying to be elicited by Creighton Waters today from Maggie's sister about the roadside shooting knowledge, that testimony really was meant for Cousin Eddie, Curtis Smith. And if the state loses their ability to call this witness for whatever reason, whether it's his own personal feelings about not wanting to testify, I mean, he is charged criminally, so he's got his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. He's represented by counsel, but if they can't call him, they'd be a shock. And the state may try to play it off and act like everything's under control, but that would be a major blow to the prosecution of this case.
Luke, do you agree with that? I mean, is this testimony important to this double murder case right now?
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this case being a largely circumstantial case regarding the double murders. Cousin Eddie is supposed to be that direct evidence, some type of gratuitous confession on the side of the road that Alec's supposed to tell him before he is assisted in his own suicide. So as far as the state is concerned, he's supposed to be the cherry on the sundae. He's really that exclamation point that they just need to have to ensure a conviction. And for some reason, it seems like they're hesitating. They're having some doubts about whether they're going to put him up. It's not by design. So Brian's alluded to various reasons. Maybe he knows his worth. I don't know. Maybe he's asking for too much. But
the other important thing, JR, is that not only would he potentially provide some direct evidence of potentially the killings of Paul and Maggie, he would also be providing information to the jury about that attempted suicide. And under the law in South Carolina, the state can seek a special jury instruction that if there's a proper nexus between the attempted suicide and the crime itself due to a guilty conscience, the state can seek to get a special jury instruction that the jury can think about that act, his attempt to kill himself, as an inference of guilt.
Right.
And without that testimony, they don't get that. And that's another reason the state is going to be having some problems here if they can't get this kind of evidence out. And they try to get it out through Maggie's sister today. It was proffered outside the presence of the jury, and so far that's a big kind of looming legal issue for tomorrow that Judge Newman will decide. But even if he lets it in, it would be coming in through a less effective witness.
All right, so the crime scene, the dog kennel area, the neighbor who Murdaugh hired to clean this area a couple of times a day, testifying, there he is on the stand, testifying today that water hose that he always used was kinked up. There's a picture of it right there. You can see it in the distance. It was kinked up. It was not the way that he would leave it, which would lead one to believe that someone else used the water hose that night. The state hinting around that it was Alec Murdaugh that perhaps used that water hose. How damaging was that testimony today?
it started off kind of being damaging, and the state throughout its laying out the crime scene kind of highlighted the fact that there was water in the kennel area and what could that mean, and really insinuating a washing or covering up of a crime. And they brought him in, and he was real folksy and interesting and likable, kind of from a Southern perspective. And he was very consistent about, I feed the dogs twice a day.
I clean up, I wash up, but man, I don't want to have that hose damaged, so I have it in a very neat fashion. And so that was a pretty good mark for the state. But then Mr. Griffin comes in and says, well, hey, you know, this Snapchat video that they've been showing so much, let me show you how's that hose look? That's not all rolled up the way you talk about it, is it? And he had to agree, no, it's not. And also there was still standing water that wouldn't have dried. So he really scored a good point for the defense and kind of blew that theory out of the water.
Well, Brian, also under cross-examination today, he also said he'd never seen Alec Murdaugh angry with Maggie or Paul, that he always seemed very loving and very kind. So for whatever points the state may have scored, if they did score any, with the water hose aspect of it, they perhaps lost a few points there with the jury being told by this guy, hey, look, all I ever saw was a loving father and husband here.
Yes, JR, and I can hear Creighton Waters closing right now because everyone that knew Alec Murdaugh says the same thing. You know, everyone loved him. He was charismatic. He was a friend to you and your family. He was like a second dad. So all these witnesses that can identify him, know his personality, know his traits, identify his voice on Snapchat videos, the state, you know, gets that point for them, you know, debunking a potential alibi, wasn't down at the kennels, but then they get all this good character. They get the side of him that, you know, that he doesn't have to necessarily have to be testifying to say I'm a good guy, but it's just coming in through these witnesses that know him. And so it's really important, and it's a double-edged sword for the state. They really want to kind of have these witnesses come in and kind of show him caught in these lies. And similarly with the financial folks, you know, that are testifying to all of his financial crimes, they all say the same thing. Well, he was such a great guy. The state's going to really have to close on the fact that I can hear it right now in closing. No one really knew this guy.
Right.
Nobody knows the real Alec Murdaugh. You're going to expect to hear that from Creighton Waters in closing.
Any surprising testimony from the MUSC pathologist, the woman who did the autopsies on Maggie and Paul Murdaugh? Under cross-examination today, did we learn anything new that we didn't already?
Yes and no. I mean, she was pretty consistent, and what we learned was that Dick Harpootlian was very much, particularly as it relates to Paul, trying to establish that the gunshots from the shotgun came from the right side. Mm-hmm. He particularly disagreed with her because she said the fatal wound would have come across his shoulder and entered the base of his skull and come out the top of his head. She was very consistent. She's been doing autopsies for 20 plus years. And Mr. Harpootlian tried to cross-examine her with a treatise, a medical book that discussed contact wounds. His theory is clearly that a shotgun was placed to his head and fired, causing this massive blowout to literally, in a gross way, make the brain pop out of his own head and cause some pellets to be left here. So he was doing the opposite. She wouldn't agree with him, but he did score enough points and get her to agree about some things, particularly in relation to the treatise, where he's clearly going somewhere with that.
Do you think he's going with the notion that perhaps this was a suicide, a murder-suicide?
No, it was a little confusing because that portion of the book that he was talking to her about was about some suicides, but clearly he's saying this is coming from the right side of his body, and they're going to try to portray how Paul was in that feed room. Maybe it was an ambush. Someone was already in there. Something, they're going for the opposite of what the state is going, but we're going to have to hear from their own pathologist to flesh that out, and I expect we'll hear from one.
Brian, let me get your thoughts on the job that this pathologist has done on the stand.
She's likable, she's charismatic, knowledgeable. She tries to answer a lot of questions, which is what you expect an expert to do. I mean, you know, the last line of questioning that Dick Harpootlian said is, but you'd agree that opinions are opinions. And so he's going to probably have his own pathologist opining to try to, like Luke said, you know, try to help from the defense perspective, establish that these shots came all from Paul's right, to really try to establish that someone was laying in wait in the feed room that would help the defense's theory that they were basically ambushed, bushwhacked, and surprised, as opposed to more of a domestic style confrontation killing. But I thought she was smart. She held her ground with Dick Harpootlian today. You know, Dick, you know, kind of got real conversational with her. With an expert like that, that's super intelligent, you can't outsmart them. You have to kind of talk to them, and hopefully, you know, an experienced cross-examiner like Dick Harpootlian would try to have a conversational style. He did, you know, I recall caught her in one moment that I thought he was really important to him when he was trying to, you know, kind of rely on this learned treatise that he got into evidence. A lot of people are like, how are you going to tear off a page in a book and admit it into evidence? Well, it's considered a learned treatise. Creighton Waters didn't object to it because there's no grounds, but he kind of referenced a part that tried to show a close contact wound by showing that the gases from the shotgun would have been what was doing the initial damage, pushing out before the pellets can even get out, which would cause the injury to act the way it was. And at one point, the pathologist said, you know, the energy and the gases cause this, and he kind of said, stop, say that again. And she kind of had to say, well, yeah. The other big point that I think she couldn't really deal with, she wasn't prepared to deal with, Dick Harpootlian kind of showed her the fact that there was a circular marking on the side of Paul's head that she would consider to be the exit. And, you know, he kind of brought it to her attention. It wasn't really fleshed out in a report, and he made a big to-do about, you know, that would be consistent with potentially a close-range shot. She was like, well, no, but I can see what you're saying. So it was interesting today.
I want to show our viewers something that I don't think we've had a chance to see before. That's body cam footage that was released. I believe the jury has already seen this body cam footage. It shows the interaction with Alec Murdaugh with the first deputy that arrived on the scene the night of those murders. Have you guys seen this video? And if so, what do you make of it? Is he acting the way you would expect one to act after finding the bodies of his wife and his son?
Well, it's hard to say, but I think yes. I'm sure the jury has seen this, and you see him doubling over and kind of pacing and seeming upset. I'm sure the jury has several different body cam angles of him and his live reaction. Now, whether he's, you know, a great actor and it's all a long con, or whether this is true Alec Murdaugh in the moment finding his loved ones dead, that's going to be for the jury to decide. But these are the types of things that juries get very interested in. How is someone acting in the heat of the moment? I mean, look, he's covering his face, he's holding up his shirt. It's not exactly very flattering, because if you're a fan of Alec Murdaugh or a fan of the defense, you're saying this is real, live, panic, emotion. You can't fake that. And I know there's lots of debate online about whether he's real crying in court or fake crying, and we'll let that debate rage on, but this stuff really allows a jury to kind of assess his credibility in real time in that moment. To me, it looks credible.
Ryan, you're watching this as we watch it. The body language, he appears to be upset over the situation. Again, as your brother just pointed out, don't know if he's putting on a good front here for the deputy or what, but what's your take of what you're seeing?
Jared, my take is everyone knows about this trial. Hopefully the jurors are as unbiased and have sworn a duty to do their fair and impartial job to assess this case. But, you know, everyone uses their common experiences. All the lawyers in closing will be saying, use your common sense. All of them are going to say that. And so I think when you're looking at a video like this, you got to use your common sense. Now, I've seen many, many videos like this of witnesses and defendants themselves after a murder caught on body cam being interviewed in the absence of counsel. And he seems pretty consistent with someone that's genuinely upset. Now, opinions are going to differ about whether that's credible. If he was a master manipulator, as alleged by the state, he would be prepared for this moment when law enforcement comes, because he called law enforcement. So they would say, well, he was ready for this, just like he conned his firm, just like he conned, you know, his friends, his family. He's conning everybody. But there is reasonable doubt here that this is a true emotional moment where he's just found his longtime wife and his youngest boy found in a gruesome, gruesome way.
And what we don't see on that shirt that he's wearing, we don't see any blood on that shirt.
Correct, we don't. Just like Special Agent Zapata found no human blood on that shirt, we don't see any blood.
What happens next? I know the state had said something about trying to rest their case by Wednesday, but we still have that additional General Motors matter when it comes to Murdaugh's Chevy Suburban. So are we going to get to that tomorrow? And if so, is this thing going to wrap on the state side tomorrow?
I think so. They seem confident. I think they thought they were going to wrap up when they had Cousin Eddie, and now that's a big question mark. Someone will testify, probably a FBI agent, maybe there's someone the same one as before. Someone's going to interpret that OnStar General Motors data now that it's been authenticated. We're going to have probably a lengthy testimony from Agent Owens, who's the lead investigator, who's going to summarize all the things and try to tie up the loose ends. And then the real question mark is, does Cousin Eddie testify or not? But if he doesn't testify, we're certainly wrapping up tomorrow.
You believe the same, Brian? We're wrapping up tomorrow?
Yeah, wrapping up. State will rest its case. The defense will get an opportunity to put on a case or not. They've introduced lots of evidence, so they're definitely going to put up a case, and it'll be time to get with that side of it. And so that should be interesting.
All right. Anything we have not covered from today that you guys want to chime in on?
No, it's just fascinating. I mean, this is a real. The Cousin Eddie revelation is both in a trial. I know, everyone kind of feels like, why aren't these lawyers doing better? Why are they calling out of order? I've seen a lot of online, kind of sentiment about why are they jumping around? We had to proffer a lot of testimony, number one, but they are kind of going in and out of order, and I think a lot of it is because they're dealing with what's coming their way. I mean, trial is not a science; it's it's trial practice, and there's variables that are coming at you in all directions. So on both sides, the trial lawyers have to know the law. For the defense, you got to be a zealous advocate. For the state, you got to be representing the state of South Carolina in the prosecution of a very important crime. And variables are rolling at you fast. And so this Cousin Eddie situation is just what I've been thinking about all day. So we'll see how Mr. Waters deals with it, and we'll know more tomorrow.
See how it all plays out. And of course, testimony resuming at 9:30 in the morning. You can watch on several different platforms. You can watch on WLTX Plus. You can watch on our YouTube channel. Or as always, you can watch on our website. That's WLTX.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you.